Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's ThunderCats episode review, right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly. As always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's ThunderCats episode review. Now, I hope you all had a very happy Thanksgiving. And as you all know, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, I had to go ahead and postpone this ThunderCats episode review by a couple of days. Now, I just got done watching it. Matter of fact, I went ahead, set my DVR the night it premiered because I didn't get back into town until late that night. Anyway, went ahead, set my DVR, and that sucker's been sitting on there all weekend, so I finally got around to watching it. And I must say this. Now, okay, just so you all know, this is Season 1, Episode 13, entitled Between Brothers. And it also happens to be the Season 1 finale. Because of that, my opinion and thoughts of this week's episode, I looked at this episode in a different light because it is the season finale, and a season finale has certain expectations to it. I will start off this review by saying this, that I read online that this was the best episode of the season, and I have to disagree. I highly disagree on that remark. Is it one of the best? I would even disagree about that. It's one of the better ones, but it is not amongst the best. I still hold the Legacy episode, and I still hold the first two episodes, which were the series premiere. I still hold those to be the top, the best episodes of the season. Like I said, this episode, it wasn't bad, and it is among the better ones, especially among the standalone filler episodes. Because this one is highly canon material. It's all heavy plot-driven material in this week's episode. But it's not nowhere... Out of 13 episodes, I wouldn't even put this one in the top 5. So, what happened in this week's episode? Long story short, this week's episode, Liono-Tigra entered the astral plane to retrieve the Spirit Stone, I believe is what it was called. And of course, as we saw in last week's episode, they get followed in by Mumm-Ra. So of course, there's going to be some type of confrontation between Mumm-Ra, Liono, and Tigra in the astral plane, and that they would battle over the stone. That's what we expect. That's pretty much what happened in this week's episode. Also, outside, one thing we didn't expect was that in last week's episode, when we saw Grune and some of the lizard forces, we assumed that they had they kind of fell back a bit, abandoned post, if you will, but they didn't. They fell back, but what happened was they just left the village for the meantime, and they came back with the full force. I mean, we're talking about they said that the full lizard army was there. So, outside of the astral plane, we pretty much had Panthro, Chitara, Wily Cat, and the elephant monks to fend off this large lizard army. And they managed to do so, which is one of the problems I had with this week's episode, which I will address later on in this review. But all in all, what occurs later on in the episode was that the betrayal that we heard that we were told that Tigra would commit against Liono, it happened. They got over it fairly quickly, which is the biggest problem I had about this week's episode. They got over it fairly quickly, confronted Mumm-Ra, got the stone, whooped his ass apparently, and then it was all hunky-dory, and the episode ends with Chitara acknowledging her feelings for Tigra, and then Liono was there looking like a dumb fuck, surprised at what had happened, and that's where the episode ended. So with that said, before I get into, I'm gonna do this review like this. What worked in this week's episode? What worked? This week's episode, like I said, was plot driven, heavy in canon material. that worked. There was a lot of action, more so than what we have been seeing in the last couple of weeks. I would argue that this is probably the most action-packed episode. I want to say this is the most action-packed episode. Well, no, I can't really say that because the episode, The Forest of Meiji-Or, had some pretty good act. Well, not as much, no. So yeah, this is probably the most action-packed episode since Legacy. So yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll say that worked for this week's episode. Also, the fact that everyone was fighting. See, that's the thing. In a lot of these ThunderCats episodes, if you will go back and look at all 13 episodes of Season 1, a lot of the action, if it's not Lionel doing the majority of the action, then it's Chitara, Tigra, and Panthro. However, in this week's episode, Wily Kid and Wily Cat did action, and the Elephant Monks did action. So yeah, it seemed like every character had their little moment to shine in this week's episode, which I will say is the third biggest thing it had going for it. The fact that they did put a spotlight on all of the other supporting characters, which is good because that's something that the series has been lacking, you know, because this series focuses so much on Lionel that at times you forget that the title of the fucking series is called ThunderCats. You forget that a lot. Anywho, so now that I've gotten the three things that the episode had going for it, I'm going to address what the episode did not have going for it. First and foremost, the biggest thing I think that needs to be addressed is the liono-Tigra rivalry situation that they had been setting up for the past 2 weeks. A huge letdown in this episode. A excruciatingly huge letdown, okay? Now you all will probably be saying, it's like, oh Larry, what you talking about? The episode was great. It has so much action. Action does not make a good episode at all. Action does not make for a good story. You do not believe me? Look at Bleach. Prime fucking example of a series that has nothing but action, but absolutely no fucking story whatsoever, okay? Action is not a substitute for story. You just shit. Look at the fucking Transformers movies. Action-packed. Ridiculous fucking story. So to say that this episode was good just because it had a lot of action in it, that's a flawed argument because there are so many other things that account for a good fucking episode. The story being one of them, and one of the biggest fucking letdowns in this week's episode story was the fact that they completely dropped the ball on the Lionel-Tigra rivalry. Why? Because for 2 weeks they've been setting up for this, especially at the end of last week's episode when we got the omen that Tigra would betray Lionel, and come to find out that betrayal, there was no betrayal. There wasn't. Why? Because let me tell you why there was no betrayal. Because a lot of you gonna say, oh, the Chitara thing, that was the betrayal. No, that wasn't. No, that was not. That was not a betrayal. You have been lied to if you think that's Tigra's betrayal. When they're in the astral plane and they get the little flashback about the time when Tigra and Lionel were playing in this restricted area, you know, this forbidden area, and Lionel, when, you know, there was a log across this bottomless pit, and y'all gonna get this reference later on because I really did like it. The bottomless pit, right? There's this log running across this tree, if you will, and we find out that Tigra was responsible for dropping Lionel into that pit, and that he left him there, right? And when they got into the fight, the same thing happened where Tigra Leonidas kicked, and here comes that reference because I'm sorry if you didn't see that when fucking Tigra kicked his ass down the pit. If you didn't think 300, I'm sorry, but that shit. This is Third Earth. This is ThunderCats. He kicked his ass down the fucking pit. I was dying laughing when that shit happened, bro. That shit was hilarious. But anyway, so Tigra kicks Lionel back down the pit, and Lionel's in the same fucking position that he was in when he was a child. And Tigra leaves him. But then we find out that apparently when Tigra left him as a kid, he went back and told their dad so that they could get help for Lionel. So he did a bad thing, but he quickly ratified it. He made up for it, right? And then he even went back and scooped Lionel's ass out of the pit, you know, in the present day in the astral plane. So that wasn't a betrayal. And then when the whole Chitara thing happened at the end of the episode, that was Chitara making the conscious choice to choose Tigra over Lionel. And she said that she felt like not making clear what her intentions were led to some of the tension between Lionel and Tigra. She acknowledged the fact that she did not make her intentions clear, which means that she always meant to end up with Tigra. Always. Now, that is debatable because we know for a fact she flirted her ass off with Lionel in the earlier part of the season, which that comment that she didn't make her intentions clear and that she always wanted to be with Tigra, that makes her come off as a floozy. That makes her come off as, well, let's just stick with floozy because I don't want to say anything else that would be demeaning towards women. But my fellas know what she acts like, okay? Yeah, she acts like a little hot mess, if you will. But here's the thing, though. That's not a betrayal because that's not Tigra's fault. That's Chitara making a conscious fucking decision to choose Tigra over Lionel. Now, why did I say that this episode dropped the ball on that? Was because this whole little rivalry thing was setting up Tigra for a nice little character arc. And I felt like they completely copped out of it. They completely copped out of it. In last week's ThunderCats episode review, I gave you a nice little fucking I gave you a nice little setup to what could have been a very interesting story with these characters that could have potentially propelled Tigra into a more prominent status as a main character. Now, of course, I didn't expect that to happen, but what I'm saying is when you spend time setting up something as pivotal as a rivalry between two of the main characters, and then not only that, but this is your grand season finale, there are certain expectations that should be met. And this episode did not meet those expectations at all. They dropped the ball on that. They seriously did. Okay? They didn't even try to make it a rivalry. I mean, honestly, they could have just as easily just had Lionel and Tigra been talking, and Lionel just say, you know what, Tigra, I'm sick of your shit. Let's go ahead, let's scrap it out right now, and let's put an end to it. What was the whole fucking point of the whole flashback thing? No, that didn't serve much purpose, if you think about it. Because like I said, they could have just had it at each other's throats, and then after they got done beating the shit out of each other, they'd have been like, all right, you know what? Say, man, this is stupid, bruh. We fighting for all the wrong fucking reasons, man. This shit is dumb, man. Let's just squash it. Could have just as easily done that. So, yeah, they dropped the fucking ball on that, okay? Also, the whole, since I'm on this train of thought, let's just stick with the whole Chitara thing. Also, the whole Chitara thing was bullshit, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because that series was actually doing a pretty decent job at setting up that love triangle. Now, if memory serves me correctly, I believe Tigra and Chitara are together in the original series, which is why I always assumed that they would be an item in this series. The fact that they were setting something up between Lionel and Chitara was a surprise to me, because I don't think that's how it was in the original series. But what I'm saying is this: they've taken the time to set up this love triangle, and they just they just as easily have dismissed it, it seems. Now, you can argue that no, they haven't dismissed it. Why? Because Chitara choosing Tigra at the end of this episode and Lionel finding out about it the way he did, that's going to lead into a bigger confrontation down the line. Okay, I'll give you that. Maybe this chapter isn't closed yet. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. But what I'm saying is this. I don't feel like they addressed that properly in this episode. Granted, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that what they did was necessarily bad, okay? Because that's the cliffhanger for next season. But what I'm saying is this. That felt forced, that didn't feel natural, and it didn't feel like it merited that ending. You see what I'm saying? Like, because we know about the whole Tigra, Chitara flashback thing, but that didn't seem like enough. To me, that didn't seem like enough. When you're trying to set up a fucking love triangle, you need to have pretty strong convictions in your characters for them to act the way they do. Especially if they're making conscious fucking choices like Chitara did. Okay, and basing that whole thing off a little flashback, no, that's not enough for me. Some shit would have needed to go down in the present for her to just do what she did. Or for her to not even consider Lionel's feelings or anything like that. She can't just make that fucking decision based off of a flashback years ago. That's horse shit. That's horse shit. Okay? And now I'm going to get into the third part of this fucking episode that really fucking disturbed me. And it was the fact that apparently the entire lizard army is there. And Wily Kid, Panthro, Chitara, and the fucking elephant monks were able to defeat the whole fucking army. Are you serious? They were able to defeat Mumm-Ra's complete forces by themselves? Then what was the whole fucking point of making friends and allies throughout the entire fucking season if all you needed were the elephant monks to take out the lizard army? What was the fucking point of that? I'm sorry, that I don't buy that. That seems, that once again, that's a cop-out. It seems like that's just, they just wrote that shit so that they could have a conclusion for the season. No. That don't cut it, Jack. That doesn't cut it, and you ain't fooling me. You may be fooling everyone else, but you ain't pulling the wool over my fucking eyes, alright? That don't fucking cut it. That's sloppy ass writing, in my opinion. That's really bad fucking writing. Anyway. I could get into the thing with Panthro's arms, but I don't really care enough. Because I'm pretty sure he's going to get robotic arms. Anyway, so I don't even care about that. Also, the Spirit Stone being the astral plane, I'm sorry, but was that a tad bit too obvious to anyone else? Because the second they stepped into the astral plane and Lionel made that comment that is right under their noses, I immediately came up with, it's the astral plane itself. The Spirit Stone is the astral plane. And then sure enough, it turned out to be that. So, in the comments below, anyone, please let me know if that was excruciatingly obvious to you also. Because it was to me. Not much mystery there, you know? Not at all. Yeah. Oh, and also the Mumm-Ra fight was a huge disappointment too, because I mean it wasn't even a fight. Mumm-Ra just kind of beat them up a little bit, and then they completely just murked him. So yeah, why even bother fighting, right? Yeah. So to wrap this thing up, I'm pretty much, because this is the season finale, I'm pretty much going to give you my final thoughts on the first season as a whole. So what do I think about the first season of ThunderCats as a whole? Not from an individual episode perspective, but from an entire season 1, 13 episode perspective. What did I think about this series? And this is what I think. It is a good series. It is a good series. Okay? It is a good series. As a whole, ThunderCats season 1 is actually pretty solid. There, as far as what my expectations for the series were, this series has at times, it has met expectations. It has exceeded expectations, but it has also fallen far below expectations. So this is what I'm saying. Me personally, I'll be honest with you. Me personally, I think that the first season had more mediocre episodes than actually good episodes. Because like I said, if you want to talk about really good episodes, you're talking about if you want to talk about really good episodes, or shit, just good episodes in general. Okay, if you're talking about like good episodes in general, you're talking about episode 1 and 2, which were the 1 hour series premiere. You're talking about the Peddler episode. That was actually pretty that was actually pretty good. The episode with the Peddlers was actually pretty good. You're talking about the 2 episodes where we get a look into Mumm-Ra's past, which is pretty much when the Temple of Omens episode and the Legacy episode. You're talking about those 2. You're talking about the Forest of Meiji Or. That was another really good episode. And I would even go ahead and say that Into the Astral Plane is among one of the best episodes. But yeah, out of 13 episodes, I just mentioned 6, which is less than half of the season. So right then, and so I mean, you can go ahead and I lied. Old Friends was another good episode. It sure was. I apologize for that. Old Friends was another really good episode. Okay, so 7. So yeah, so in that essence, then yeah, the first season has more good episodes than bad episodes. But like I said, of course, this is just my personal opinion, and you're supposed to take this all with a grain of salt. But other than that, I mean, like I've mentioned before about this series, the animation is on point, the voice acting is very well done, and for the most part, the writing is good. The only places where I felt like the writing was not up to par were, of course, those little standalone filler episodes, and then some of the central plot line that they try and tie in with the other filler episodes. Like some of that shit just came across as pretty weak writing also. Weak attempts to try and fit in canon material with what is clearly perceived as just filler. So all in all, like I said, season 1, not bad, especially for a remake, because I know, there were a lot of concerns. There were a lot of doubt with the series, taking a very famous and well-established series like the ThunderCats and rebooting it for a younger generation. I will say this. As far as that goal is concerned, I think this series has done that. I think this series has brought in, it has brought the ThunderCats back up into pop culture, especially for a younger generation. I mean, I think that the younger generation can go ahead and they can look to this as, yes, this is my, excuse me, this is my ThunderCats. Just like our generation came up with the Justice League cartoons, whereas our older brothers and sisters and even some of our parents came up with the Super Friends, and we said, this is our Justice League cartoon, just like some of us came up with Batman Beyond, and we said, this is our Batman cartoon, I think this show has done that. And I would like to believe that at the root of this entire project, that was the #1 goal, was to make a ThunderCats series for a younger generation, to reintroduce this franchise back into pop culture. And I think they did that. So they get a nod from me for doing a good job with that. I think they have. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to wrap this Yeah, I think that's like my 25-minute mark. I don't want to make this video excruciatingly long. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap this video up. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me for this season of ThunderCats. And who knows, based upon, I don't know if I'll do season 2. I'm not sure. I guess if the demand is there for it, then I'll go ahead and do it. I know that when I first started off the ThunderCats reviews, the first few reviews got a lot of views. You know, I'm talking about 4,000 to 5,000 views a piece. You know, they did really, really well. But over time, the views just kind of declined. So what I'm saying is this: if the demand, when the new season kicks off, when season 2 comes around, if the demand is up, you know, if people are hitting me left and right talking about, Larry, man, are you going to do season 2 of ThunderCats? Are you going to do season 2? Are you going to do season 2? I might look into it. Even though I did not like the season finale, that doesn't mean that I will completely stop reviewing it. No. But with that said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and it has been an honor and a pleasure for me to bring you my reviews for season 1 of the new ThunderCats series. As always, guys, stay tuned on OAW Otaku Assemble Weekly for more of my videos, and until next time, peace.